shine. She's a part of the assembly line. She's making history, working for victory. Rosie.
Rosie the Riveter is this icon from World War II. Rosie became famous because of a song that was written in 1943 about women that were working in the defense plants. So they were women that were building airplanes or welding ships or making ammunition to support the World War II effort. There is no one woman who was actually Rosie. She just represents all the women that were contributing.
I was a welder. I went to the hiring hall in Richmond, and they gave me papers and sent me out to Yard 3 out at the end of Canal Street in Richmond.
I was hired as a welder, and I worked a few months and I became a journeyman welder. I took the certification, and I went from 90 cents an hour to $1.38 when I became a journeyman welder. And I could weld anything, anywhere, flat, vertical, overhead, whatever was needed. And I spent 2.5 years in Yard 2 at Kaiser Shipyard in Richmond, and I worked the graveyard shift, which was 11 at night till 7 in the morning.
There were women who ferried the planes over to England after they were built so that the people over there could fly over to Germany and bomb Hitler. We helped in many ways to win the war.
Ships now, they take months to build, and the shipyards have time to work on them. And they were cranking out these ships, 20 of them lined up and cranking them out. It's amazing to me how many ships they built and how fast.
As the men were taken into the service, they needed more people, and they took the first women welders into the shipyards in July of 1942. In 1943, they brought in the first black men, and then the black women followed.
It was, very difficult for women and people of color to have opportunities where they would get paid well or to be in supervisory positions. There were job opportunities, certainly for women of color, often as domestic servants or in agriculture, where they were low paid and didn't, have a lot of control. For middle class or upper class white women, there still was a pink ghetto, they called it, jobs, like secretary or nurse or teacher, but they really didn't have opportunities to work in the trades or jobs that were managerial and that would pay better. And so, in a sense, that was a segregation of job type.
Rosie was a white woman's story because it didn't apply to the women in my life. The women in my life had been working outside their homes since slavery. Black women, there are black women who consider themselves Rosies, and I think that that's fine. And it was a very high point. The women who were included, that was not my life experience, so I did never consider myself a Rosie because I never worked in that role.
And that's why it's important to have places like Rosie the Riveter where we can start talking about those difficult truths.
All the day long, whether rain or shine, she's a part of the assembly line. She's making history, working for victory. Rosie the Riveter keeps a sharp lookout for sabotage.
Since the park opened at the Visitor Center in May of 2012, we really have become known as Rosies, and the job that we did for the war effort from 1941 to 1946. The main ones were when Vice President Biden invited us to come to Washington, D.C. to be recognized for the work we had done during the war. And also, we met our president, Obama.
Because America was victorious in World War II, there was a lot of celebration of the home front, so I think there was a little recognition of what had happened. But in terms of the real story, in terms of the remembering of the discrimination and the prejudice and the end of the war, where all of a sudden there were people wanting to the Rosies to go back home and not have the kind of opportunity and pay that they had been given during the war, that kind of story really came out, I'd say, late 70s and the 80s.
It was very impressive the way the country came together collectively to address the overwhelming issues at the time, and particularly with the role of women that up until that point hadn't been a major part of the workforce, but became a very important part during the war and certainly built on that thereafter.
We were all very happy that we could help. All the women were.
Today, November the 22nd, 2016, I'm 93 years young. Are we?
Well, happy
Thank you! Thank you!
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kate. Happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And you have such lovely voices. Thank you. Don't I have the nicest friends?
Knowing these women, they're so inspirational. It was a difficult time, yet they sacrificed. They also learned skills. They insisted that, yes, they could work alongside men, and they passed that down to their daughters and their granddaughters. And so they're a constant reminder that given the opportunity, we women can do anything. We might do it a little different way than a man. We can do anything, though, And so I'm just so grateful that these Rosies continue to serve their country, honored that they're willing to volunteer here and work with the public and pass on the messages and the lessons from World War II.
Sitting up there on the fuselage, that little frail can do more than a male can do. Rosie, the Riveter. Rosie's got a boyfriend, Charlie. Charlie, he's a Marine. Rosie is protecting Charlie, working overtime.